I have one of the latest models from Nordic Marine Instruments, the Östersund, which I am probably mispronouncing. Now, technically, this was their first model. This one is just the latest version with some new dials, some dressy dials, if you will. Available are three mother of pearl dials, brown, blue, and an ocean green color. And then we have this one, which is Aventurine. The case and bracelets stay the same, and as far as I could tell, so does everything else, including the indices and hands. The only difference is the dial material. But this is my first time taking a look at their diver model, as I reviewed the Navy Field Watch, the Sovereign, last year. This one is 1 millimeter bigger, has an external timing bezel, of course, and now with these new exotic dials, if you will, it creates an all-around different aesthetic, but retaining that same case and bracelet. These new models are priced at $599, and they use the Miyota 90S5 movement. I'll discuss it all in this video, so let's get to it. Let's jump into this diver model. The model name, translated from Danish, at least what Google tells me, means Baltic Sea, hence why, we have a dive watch here. Now, the originals had a textured wave pattern dial, and these new versions are less rugged, if you will, though I don't know if I would call the originals rugged, as in all configurations, I would deem these more of a dress diver. Now, before we go any further, I will get all the specs on screen here. And as I said, you're looking at a price tag of $599. And that is $50 more than the original models with the wave dials. Now, when it comes to specs, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but a lot of this watch is the same as the Sovereign Field model I reviewed last year. I'll link that review above, but this is, as far as I can tell, the same exact case and bracelet, the same crown, the same clasp, and the same case back as well. The big differences are the dive bezel and the dial, and that extra 1 millimeter of size comes from the bezel and not a larger case. The case finishing is the same as well. It's a nice mix of brushed and polish, basically a sandwich of brush and polish with a polished chamfer on top and bottom and then brushed in the middle. It's just enough, it's not overbearing, and it allows this sleek case to stand out. The lugs are pretty straight, but with the short length of the case, I think it wears well on the wrist, and I really do like the look of this case design. The crown is solid as well as it was on the field model, and it's a good size at 6.3 millimeters. It's large enough with, for me to get a good grip and for me to easily grab and screw and unscrew, as well as set the time. Sometimes with these thinner cases and crown guards, it's hard to get at that crown, especially if you have bigger hands, but I had no issues here. And same with the bezel. The bezel grip is about 2.3 millimeters, and it's sitting atop a raised ledge, which allows you to get a good purchase on it. It's a 120 click bezel, and it ratchets around perfectly, no backplay whatsoever, and it's tight, but it's also easy to turn. Now, that's not always an easy feat. I've handled a lot of bezels that have one but not the other, so at least on this example that I have, the bezel tension is really dialed in. This is an insert, though. It's not a stainless bezel, which I would prefer, but at least this way, if you do scratch it up or damage, if the brand still has extras in inventory, you can at least replace it. No lume on the bezel markers, just that lume pip on the triangle, which is more than enough. And while the markers are all black, I think I would have liked the triangle if it was reddish or reddish orange to match the accent color on the dial. What do you think about that? Would you prefer it like that, or do you feel the black suits it best? But the new part for these models are the dial materials, the mother of pearl and the aventurine dials. And these are nothing new, but they always create a unique look, a dressier look, if you will. And I have to say, I never thought that I would like aventurine, but after having a few models with them over the past 2 years, I've realized I do like them, and I would say for the most part, that's because when you're wearing it, it's a black or a deep blue dial. It's not ostentatious or in your face like mother of pearl can be. Now, when the light hits it just right, or you get a closer look, that's when you can see the gold and the silver and the blue speckles that remind you of the night sky. I like the choice of hands and indices here as well. There's nothing overly flashy. And I wouldn't say it's exactly dive watch hands and indices either, but they have facets and cuts that are well done and will give a nice sparkle when it catches the light. And most of all, it's still easy to read the time at a glance. The Anchor Shield logo is still present, and so is the very, very small model name and water resistance text, to which I still wonder if it's that small, why bother putting it on the dial? At least it doesn't say automatic. Now, none of the dive models come with a date either. All use a no date Miyota 90S5. I personally love a no date dial because I like the symmetry, but I know for many, a no date dial is a deal breaker. The bracelet, end links, end clasp, and that case back, they're all the same as I said. They're all the same as the original and that field model as well. And, for the most part, that's okay. I understand even though RZE is a manufacturing partner of Nordic Marine, they're still a new company and it is easier to take the existing case and just do dial refreshes or dial, different colors, new handsets, etc. That said, as they move forward as a brand, I would like to see some diversity in their models. Now, all that said, there's nothing wrong with this bracelet. It's about 3 millimeters thick. It uses screw pins for the links. It has quick release bars on the end links, and you got that quick adjustment clasp. Now, I have to say, it's funny to me that 1 millimeter makes such a big difference, but it really does, at least on certain watches. And this, I think, is a great example of that. Now, for my preferences and my wrist size, which is 7.5 inches or 19.05 centimeters, I prefer this diver over the field model, and simply it's due to the size. Now, it may also be because of that bezel and that slight extra thickness and just how the bezel adds to the overall aesthetic, but I much prefer this one and how it looks on my wrist. And, the field model was just a touch too small for me. Now, as I've been saying a lot lately, you may want a larger one, some may want it even smaller. We all have our preferences. For this style of watch, I think it's a great size. I could probably still do 41 or 42 millimeters as well, but I don't find this one to be too small. The lume is pretty good as well. BGW9 is used here, and it seems to be filled in well inside the indices and hands. Don't expect this one to be an all-nighter, but those indices and the hands, they do glow nicely. Those indices are probably going to fade out quicker than the hands, but you should get about a few hours of it glowing in the dark to be able to tell the time. Overall, I really like this piece from Nordic Marine. Now, while I've never seen the original dials in person, I probably would still prefer them over these new exotic material dials or dressier dials. And it's not because anything is wrong with Mother of Pearl or Aventurine. I just prefer simpler dials for the most part, or something a little more muted these days. Now, I do like the case and bracelet, and that 1 millimeter of extra size due to that bezel works well for me. But at $599, I do feel there is one thing missing with this watch. Any guesses on what that would be? Yes, a hard coating. Isn't it amazing how spoiled we can get? As I've talked about in the past few years, these hard coatings, they don't mean that the watch can't get scratched, but it surely does lessen it and will keep that watch looking newer longer. Now, I noticed when this watch arrived to me, which had been passed around to a few other reviewers before me, it had some desk rash on the clasp and a few marks on the case sides. Now, I taped off the polished parts of the clasp. I gave it a brushing to remove most of them, but you can still see that rub mark on the non-crown side. Now, this is not a newsflash. Stainless steel scratches, I get it. But with so many brands at this price point, having all the same features as this watch, plus the hard coating, I think it belongs on the Nordic Marine watches as well. And with RZE as a manufacturing partner, considering all of their watches have an ultra hex coating, as they call it, it's surprisingly absent on these. As usual, I want to hear from you, though, so head to the comments and discuss this Nordic Marine ØSTERSØEN. ØSTERSØEN. I don't know how to pronounce the name. You probably won't either unless you're Danish, and I apologize for not being able to pronounce it. But if you want to read more of my thoughts and see some pictures as well, there will be a written review linked in the description, as well as a link to the Nordic Marine website. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.